Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, where I talk about the planes in the book. In this episode, Rathenau 7K, from the Which Play book, but first, something to address. Originally, I intended for the series to not just be about the flying circus planes, but also drip-feeding some real-life history of early heavier-than-air flight that inspired these planes and some crunchy flying mechanic within the RPG. But the first episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus had a rough progress. I had to rewrite the entire script like 3 times to get it right, and I basically couldn't get everything I wanted in it. So, let's talk about what I previously missed. One of the more interesting features of the Thriller Cobra, the top wing gun. Before reliable interrupter or synchronization gears were developed which allow machine guns to fire reliably between propellers, machine guns were mounted above the upper wings in some biplanes to get over the issues, literally. But, these early wing-mounted guns were fixed up top, which make reloading or unjamming them a massive pain in the ass and a serious danger, because autopilot isn't a thing back then, and if you leave your hand off the stick, the plane might decide to just steer itself straight to the nearest piece of terrain. Foster mounting solved this issue by mounting the gun on a rail that can be moved up and down to facilitate reloading or unjamming, but some pilots also found that one can fire the gun upward by just moving the gun halfway on the rail, a rather unusual angle that was used by several aces rather effectively. This was achieved by, well, pulling the trigger. When moved on top, the gun was triggered through a Bowden cable, the very same cable used by bicycles to apply force on the brake, but in this case the force is applied on the trigger mechanism. But, wing-mounted guns are generally less accurate than hull-mounted guns, simply because they deviate far away from the center point of the plane, which is also reflected in Flying Circus by having wing-mounted guns to be more accurate at close range but almost useless at long range. Well then, I guess I should move on to the actual topic of this episode, but before I do so, I noticed that some of my viewers thought that the Thriller Cobra MD is a very crappy plane in the book. Anyway, here's the Rathenau 7K. The Rathenau 7A is one of the first combat scouts to be introduced, using propeller-mounted deflector plates to allow the firing of a fixed forward gun on an unarmed Rathenau 7 observer. It was soon outclassed by Gotha's Arndtwerke C.10, was deemed impractical to retrofit an interrupter gear in after it has been developed due to its design, and the better Rathenau 9 came into operation using overwing guns and later interrupter gear themselves before large-scale revisions could correct this issue. Still, most of the Rathenau 7 were used by various principalities of Loner that fought alongside the UWF, or United Western Federation, and after the war, most end up in the hands of the militias, who usually upgrade them with Schreiber B9 engines from Downsing Vogels, turning them into the current Rathenau 7K. The Rathenau 7K, like the previous Thriller Cobra MD, is also a dogfighter, with good handling, low turn bleed, decent drop-off and high boost, with a reliable engine to boost for extra speed as much as you want. Now this might look good, but keep in mind this is a Rathenau 7 that has been upgraded with engines from fallen Sing Vogels, another very good dogfighter. The original engine version is very, very bad. Its 7 fuel capability is thankfully less vulnerable to fuel leak unlike the Cobra, but it's slightly slower, which isn't that bad, and more fragile, which is kinda bad. But that's not all. The Rathenau has some equipment that makes it even better at dogfighting, like the wing warping and rotary engine. So, wing warping is basically a system of pulleys and cables to twist the wing of an aircraft, steering it by mimicking the movement of a bird. In the book, this gives a tighter turning at slow speed, but like in real life, since you are literally twisting the entire frame of the wing to turn, this is not very structurally sound, and it's why the max strain for the Rathenau is kinda low. As for rotary engines, let's talk about a brief history of engines in World War I. Engines in the early 20th century are pretty crappy, they don't run well, they sometimes don't start, and they overheat very easily. For ground vehicles that's not a problem, just add a whole bunch of water in the radiators. For an airplane that needs to be as light as possible, that's a problem. Liquid-cooled inline engines work well, but they also require big heavy radiators, while air-cooled radial engines use the fast air stream to cool the engine, but it's not enough. More cooling power means more increases to power-to-weight ratio, and there's an increasing demand for power as the war goes on. The best solution at that time is to spin the whole damn engine block along with the propeller for more cooling power and thus more horsepower by having the engine producing its own cooling airflow. But there's a problem. The intense spinning induces centrifugal force on its everything, including the oil that is used as lubricants within the cylinder, which is now unable to recirculate throughout the engine, and eventually the engine will burn itself out. To prevent this, the oil is mixed with the fuel to be injected into the engine to lubricate it, which also means that rotary engines need a crap ton of oil just to operate, and the black fume coming out of it smells even worse. Also, only one type of oil works with it, castor oil, which can induce diarrhea to anyone that consumes it, and pilots will breathe in a ton of the fume when flying these rotary planes. This is truly the shitty part of early air flight that nobody wants to know. Also, because rotary engine cools by spinning its entire engine block, which often weighs a quarter or a third of a plane, this has a dramatic effect on the handling of the plane. Like if you turn against the spin, the plane will turn all right. If you turn with the spin, however, this gives the airplane an amazing turn, but it can also easily kill you if you can't control it. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is why some 30% of the British Royal Flying Corps pilots died in fucking training, and I'm not even sure if 30% is the correct number because some sources I found seem to indicate it as much higher. Heck, some rotary planes even have left turn and left for turn, for right turn and left turn. So yeah, anyway, this is why rotary engines give you +1 in dogfighting when turning in a certain direction, and also why the Rathenau 7K gives you 2 stress just for flying it. By this point you are probably thinking, hey, Rathenau 7K isn't that bad in dogfighting at all, in fact it's actually kinda good. Sadly, it's only armed with a single fixed machine gun, a light machine gun no less, which means you will be reloading it frequently and that might distract you in the middle of a combat. Not only that, since it's a light MG, it cannot be synchronized with the propellers, and people have figured out a couple methods to deal with this issue. The first is, as I previously mentioned, just mount the guns on wings to bypass the issue, literally. The second is just put the propeller out of the way of the gun, like having a pusher configuration plane. And then there's the third method, which is basically who cares, just shoot the damn gun, you bloody coward. There's a fourth method. We don't talk about the fourth method to illustrate how far people go for the third method. This is a propeller, with bullet holes from its own plane, a Sopwith baby, recovered around 1916 to 1917. The war ended in 1918. But eventually, the designer realized that people tend to not like shooting themselves in their foot. Obviously, they should give them steel-tipped shoes, and that's what they did to the propeller, adding deflector wedges on it to, well, deflect bullets. The problem is that even if the propeller is now immune to friendly fire, the energy still has to go somewhere, like the crankshaft of the engine, which is why each time you fire the gun, you have to roll the crit dice, which if low enough, damage your own engine. Don't worry, you will need to shoot your own engine like 4 times to kill it, just pray that the dice luck is on your side. So, you have a plane that's rather good at dogfighting, it's also one that can shoot itself down before the enemy does. How in the world do you use it? Well, dogfighting couldn't just be used to shoot down enemy plane, it can also be used to prevent the enemy from setting their crosshair on you. You have a reliable engine and high boost, use it to always get ahead of your opponent with similar speed. And of course, if you have this plane, you most likely are a witch, you have magic, that tends to solve most problems. Also, the Rathenau 7K is a very cheap plane, so if you do crash one and survive, it won't burn a hole in your pocket to get another one, if you actually want to. Anyway, let's check out the rest of its variants. The Rathenau 7A, which is equipped with the Rona Motorba Z11 engine, is frankly, crap. It's basically terrible in almost every single aspect, but you have so much fuel to use that you can travel quite far with it. To put it into perspective, the Schreiber B9 has 130 horsepower, the Z11 has 80. 7B, which is just 7A with flap ailerons, is at least way more durable than the 7K while being worse at dogfighting. 7C has some actual usable firepower with a synchronized MG, but honestly it's just too slow to work with. Finally, there's the EH1 variant, a Fokker Einheitsdecker copy with the Schalzlux X engine at 110 horsepower and synchronized MG. A cheap usable dogfighter that's well worth its price, which is why it's still crap. So, the Rathenau 7K, a somewhat decent dogfighter, but one that can hurt itself trying to shoot down others. However, if the pilot is a force of nature on their own, things might just work out. Anyway, wow, I didn't expect this episode to grow to such size when I was writing it. Guess all those tidbits on history make it much bigger than I originally intended. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy listening to all that, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.